investment vehicle itself, then dollars and British sterling and others would flow into it. And then China would be in a liability. If you put money into a bank, uh, uh, then this is a liability. The bank owes you money. China doesn't want to owe any money at all to foreign private investors, and it doesn't want to provide a safe haven for foreign investors. So when people talk about the BRICS Bank, they're not talking about a bank for private investors at all. They're talking only about a means of settling balance of payments deficits among governments. This bank is only going to be for governments to create its own special drawing rights or arrange its own currency swaps. Private investors will continue to invest in put their money in U.S. Treasury securities because the U.S. Treasury can keep on printing them, and it's still the measure of value by which oil and raw materials and minerals and movies are transferred. So you're having a bifurcation between a monetary system that only works for governments and the monetary system that works for the private sector.
And one of the aspects of this bifurcation or this split that has really come to the fore since Russia's invasion in Ukraine is this idea of U.S. financial imperialism. I think this is something that a lot of people didn't really pay close enough attention to in the previous decade. The U.S. tried this out. We saw this, of course, with Venezuela. We saw it with Iran, a number of other countries, the freezing of reserves, the sanctions, all of the other tools that the U.S. Treasury uses. So my question to you is, has U.S. financial imperialism or the tools of U.S. hegemony on the financial side, has that exposed the U.S. to much of the world in your view?
Here's the problem that most of the debts of the global south, Latin America, of all countries are denominated in US dollars. And the idea of debts is they bear interest and you have to keep rolling them over. You have to pay interest and amortization just as if you have a mortgage. Well, all of this is coming to a head, as I mentioned, this fall, because if you're uh, the average Latin American or African or South Asian country, something has to give. You can't afford to buy your food and energy and pay your foreign debts. So there's going to be the threat of default. And if there's a threat of default, then this whole superstructure of debts where banks guarantee debts, their derivatives betting, can the debts be repaid or not? What will the value of the debts be? How much will you'll have something like occurred in the 1980s after Mexico couldn't pay. Interest rates for Brazil and Argentina went up to 45%. And in Mexico, interest rates on government dollar debts went up to 22%. Something like that's going to occur again. The prices of bonds of these countries will fall. Well, the countries are now going to say to Russia, for instance, we would like to buy your oil. We're not going to follow the U.S. sanctions. We'd like to buy your grain. And they'll say to China, we'd like to buy your manufacturers. And Russia and China can say, well, we'd like to lend you the money to, so, and then you'll repay us because we know you don't have the money now. But if we lend you the money, I don't see how you can afford to repay us. The money we would lend you to buy our oil and food would just be give you enough money so you could pay your dollar debts. Why would we want to do something like that? That's the crisis that's going to occur in the fall. People are going to have to decide, well, can we default on the dollar debts? If they default, then they can, what will the U.S. do? Well, say Brazil could say, well, we're part of the BRICS and the BRICS Bank, and they're going to lend us money, but we can't afford to pay you, you dollar bondholders. Now the United States will say, well, if you do that, then we'll put sanctions on you. And the Brazil will say, well, if you put sanctions on us and we can't buy your exports, then you're just hurting yourself. You're hurting your own exporters, and you're driving us to countries that will export for ourselves. So, and the United States is going to have to say, who are we going to put in first? Whose interests are we going to look after? Will it be our dollar bondholders and the banks, or will it be our corporations that make the exports to these countries? Something has to give. There's not enough money both to buy our exports and to pay the bondholders. What's going to happen? Well, nobody knows yet, but that's what the fight's going to be about.
And to your point, as we approach the end of our conversation here, to your point, and I guess to the point that I was just making about financial imperialism, the United States has, I think, for the first time, or at least for the first time, notable example where the United States has essentially manufactured a major economy's default. And that's what's happened with Russia. They're claiming that Russia has defaulted on its debt, but that's because they have prevented Russia from actually repaying that debt because the debt has to be repaid in dollars, and the Russians can't do that for all of the reasons that are obvious. So the question is, do you believe that this is going to cause a shattering of faith in the United States as a good faith partner for other countries that might also find themselves in the crosshairs?
Well, everybody's talking about that. This is exactly what the Global South meetings are all about. And you're even having Saudi Arabia, which is one of the biggest dollar holders, talk about that. And that's what President Biden is meeting with bin Laden this week. Not bin Laden, the MSB, this week about. That's what everybody realizes, that we've run to the end of a whole cycle that of expansion debt expansion that began in 1945, when the almost the whole world emerged from the war with no private sector debt. Now it's a huge private sector debt. Government debt went way down because there wasn't a war on, but now there's government debt just to finance the failure of the global South countries to develop. Uh, Something has to give, and that's not what was supposed to happen in the textbooks, but that's what's happening. And my book is really about the different dynamics that are shaping the way in which the world is going to be dividing into these two separate trade and investment and monetary blocks.
And between final question, between the war in Ukraine, all of the turmoil surrounding that, and then of course everything that has happened since the beginning of COVID, the disruption to global supply chains, all of these things, does this mean? And I know this is a very general question, but take it in whatever direction you'd like. Does this mean that we have reached what might be called the end of the globalized neoliberal era?
Absolutely. That's the one thing that, for the last 2 years, if you read the speeches of President Putin, President Xi, the Indian speeches, they've all realized that globalization is over. And especially if you read what President Biden and what Donald Trump had said. Donald Trump said, we're now ending globalization. We're putting America first. Any deal we make, America has to come out on top. And that's pretty much it was the United States itself that has led the breakup of globalization by becoming so exploitative and one-sided with other countries that it's gaining at other countries' expense, and other countries are driven to protect themselves by de-dollarizing. And everybody had been talking about de-dollarization for maybe 3 or 4 years, but nobody expected that the United States itself would lead the de-dollarization by the Biden administration. The word used is shooting yourself in your own foot, which basically is what the neocons are doing in the Biden administration, and that's that you have both from the U.S. point of view and from China, Russia, India, Iran, the BRICS countries. There's a common interest in going their own way.
But wasn't that really a product of the capitalist forces that were behind Trump and those elements that Trump represented? I mean, there was clearly a divide in capital. You have a neoliberal, globalized capital that opposed Trump and a lot of those ideas. And then you had a sort of a domestic petro chemicals capital formation that was supportive of Trump, the dirty, polluting industries, et cetera, construction industries, petty bourgeois, small business owners, et cetera. So to me, this, I mean, not to get too Marxist about it, but it represented a split within the ruling class, a split within the capitalist class more than, America necessarily deciding to go its own way.
Well, the split you described really is between raw materials suppliers, oil, gas, mining, and monopolists on the one hand, against industry on the other. And so we're right back to the fight that industrial capitalism was supposed to sweep aside these rentier interests, and the rentiers are fighting back. And the question is, can America become a prosperous economy just by making money financially? And just by making money by controlling monopolies that other people have to pay special commissions for, and monopoly rents like they'd have to pay for a Hollywood movie, intellectual property rights, information technology. Can a country get preserve its living standards and get richer without industry? Well, the answer we saw from Trump is, well, the country is us, the 1%. We can get richer, maybe not the 99%. So when we say America get richer, we mean our companies and our sector, not the people. The people, they don't really fit into the equation that we're talking about. So yes, there's a fight between which companies, and will America be a rentier society? Will Biden appoint anti-monopoly regulators to lower costs? Can America continue to function with 18% of its GDP going for healthcare instead of providing lower healthcare? How can American industry, even information technology companies, compete if it has such expensive healthcare overhead that people have to pay, if it has such expensive housing for rental or for purchase that people have to pay? Can America really get rich just on capital gains for its real estate stocks and bonds and monopoly companies? That's the question. And the idea of the 19th century is no, that was what feudalism was all about. It can't survive that way. So, can America have a new feudalism for its 1% and somehow survive? Uh, that's the question.
I suppose that's the $25 trillion question, isn't it?
Yep.
So, okay, we will leave it there. Michael Hudson, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I know I kept you over the time I said I would. Michael Hudson is the president of the Institute for the Study of Long Term Economic Trends. He's an economist and author, many books to his name. I, of course, recommend Super Imperialism to understand so many of these dynamics, and the brand new book, The Destiny of Civilization: Finance Capitalism, Industrial Capitalism, or Socialism. Get your ebook from Counterpunch, get your hard copy wherever books are sold. Michael Hudson, thank you as always for coming to Counterpunch and helping us understand all of these issues.
Well, I'm glad we were able to cover the ground that we did. Thank you.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you as always. And we will chat again next time.